I'm going to end this series now on the writing process by talking about the mechanics of writing, and I'm going to give an elaborated version of what this might be. And it takes a couple of forms. One is, this is the way writing often happens in classical writing. If you work for the newspaper, or if you work for a book publisher, or if you work in a lawyer's office drafting contracts, or anybody who does writing as a professional process in the world, it's a very social process which goes through a number of stages. So that's one function of this idea of analysing the writing process. But also, in literacy pedagogy, we've had a number of traditions which are focused on the process of writing. There was, in fact, a whole tradition called process writing itself. So the question of analysing the stages in the design process of writing is pretty relevant and pretty important. So what we've developed here is a kind of a 5-phase model of the writing process. Phase 1 is plan, phase 2 is draft, phase 3 is review, and that review might be peer review. There might be other people who give you feedback on your work, a teacher, a peer, a copy editor if you're in the newspaper, or the editor in the newspaper might, if you're a journalist, might give you some feedback on the piece before it gets put into the newspaper, and so on the basis of which we revise. And usually ideally there's a publication process. We don't write for nothing. We don't write just, well, a diary, maybe you write for nothing, particularly if you want nobody to know what you've written in it. But in fact, even writing it down a diary, the publication process is you're going to come back and read it in years to come and remember who you were. So there is even if the audience or the readership is yourself, you don't write diaries for no reason. So these are a number of classical phases in the writing process. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and give examples of this writing process at work. And I'm going to use, for example, our Scholar platform, where we have built a number of stages in the writing process. And I'm going to show you some writing that's under construction, if you like, or these 5 stages at work in the Scholar environment. Now, in fact, you can do these 5 stages in handwriting. You can do them in a lawyer's office as you draft a contract. They're not, they're generic, but I'm going to give you this one specific example, which is from this from our own research, from our own practice, where we've tried to build these phases of writing into a writing space for learners. So here we are in this first screenshot, and I'm at the first phase, which is planning. So writing, as I started off by saying, is this highly premeditated, structured kind of process. So on the left-hand side of the screen there, what you see is a quote that I've see that line down the left there. That means it's a quote. I've got some dot points. I'm starting to organize my ideas on the screen. And on the right-hand side of the screen, what I've got the structure of my argument. You can see there are headings, there are subheadings. As it happens in Scholar, you can drag these up and down. So we often put all these little headings in and we think of the sections. So before we even start writing, the planning process is about mapping something out and thinking, if you like, about the textual architecture. Now, remember what I said before about writing being a multilinear process? We're going to go back over this text, which is word after word, section after section. It looks linear, but in fact the design process is deeply multilinear. So our first cut in that design process, which is the drafting process, I might build a rough outline like this. I might build a plan, and what I might do is I might put in some quotes. I'm pretty careful to keep that marked up as a quote, see the line there, because I want to be careful I don't accidentally plagiarize. I might put citations in. I might have found a nice image here. I did find a nice image. I'm a kid in school. I'm writing about climate change. I found that nice image. I put it in. I might find a video. I might put it in. So this is multimodal writing. So if you like, I sort of collect all the resources. I throw them under the headings, and I've got a rough layout of the whole thing that I'm going to write. So that's phase number 1. I'm now on phase number 2. You can see what I've done is I've cleaned this text up. It's now continuous text. I've typed some more stuff in. I've framed it very carefully. I've gone back over each sentence. I've read each sentence carefully. So this is my current version. So I've kept my first version. See there on the right, there's my version control. I've kept my first version because I'm kind of deleting things I don't use, but I might want to go back to something because I actually, I probably ended up with more ideas and more quotes and more material than I'm going to use, but I want to keep that first version in case I need to go back to it. Also, while I'm writing, I may be lucky enough to have had a teacher that gave me an assessment rubric. So here I'm a student writing a biography of Rosa Parks. This is actually a real student writing this actual text. And on the right there is a kind of a rubric which describes the features of the information text, which is a biography. So if you like, that's talking about the genre in abstract terms. The genre is information text, and within the genre of information text, one type of information text is a biography. So as the student's writing there on the left, on the right, they see the rubric that the teacher has constructed for them. What we might also do in a digital environment is we might be lucky to have a spell checker. It's very easy to make typos. Nobody's spelling in the world is perfect. English has this massive vocabulary, so how on earth can you remember all these words and all their spelling anyhow? So what we have here on the right now is we're running a thing which in Scholar we call a checker. And what the checker does, it doesn't say whether it's right or wrong. Actually, it's philosophically, we've designed something which is not a spelling and grammar checker, because you know what spelling and grammar checkers do all the time? They miss things which are actually wrong because it corresponds with a real word, even though semantically, it doesn't make sense. But also what it does, it picks up false positives. I mean, there's a whole, the grammar checkers are as wrong as much as they're right about words. So anyhow, what we've got here is this thing called a checker, which just makes change suggestions and codes those. So see here, it says hyphen required. Well, maybe the hyphen's not required. That's a contentious point. It's really just a suggestion. Do you want to put a hyphen there with African American? And complex expression, the whole, this is the one that's highlighted at the moment. By the way, I've moused over these annotations, and the bit that's highlighted is that particular annotation. And it says complex expression. And what that actually means is, you can just say this is how the story begins. You've made this sentence overly complicated by putting the word whole in. So this is just simply making suggestions to help you improve your writing. And part of contemporary writing is actually being able to use machines effectively as for suggestive text, for grammar checking and so on. So part of authentic writing today, in an old-fashioned universe, this might be regarded as cheating or relying on the machine. Because in our writing today we habitually rely on machines, a normal part of the pedagogy of writing is to learn how to intelligently use the machine to support you in your writing. We're moving to the next phase. So we've done the planning phase, we've done the drafting phase, now we're moving on to the review phase. And in fact, what we have here is this text being sent to another student who is going to do a review. So this is structured feedback. And what they have here is they have the same rubric that the teacher constructed, which they saw while they were writing. They then use that rubric to review another student. So see there's a little slider. They pull the slider across. You can open out the little criteria underneath to see what all the criteria mean, to check what a 2 is or a 3 is. You can type in your explanation. You can do submit. And here is that rubric expanded. So it's got lots of prompts in it which are actually about the students thinking about the nature of their writing. And it's a structured environment whereby the students can give structured feedback to their peers around the criteria in the rubric. There are a set of prompts, if you like, about giving constructive feedback. The first student gets their work back, and here's their writing on the left, and you can see on the right, these are the scores, the summaries of the scores they've got from the other students. And here is one piece of feedback from another student. So the students read the text carefully, given them a whole lot of feedback. So this is part of the review process, which will then help the student revise their work. They get back annotations. So these, as they mouse over the annotations and open them up, they can see the comment the other students made. So reviews, if you like, are global commentary against large, global, abstract criteria, whereas annotations are detailed in-text comments. It's possible to add another comment, create another annotation. And by the way, we can see the names of these students here, but in fact, I'm the teacher, which is why I can see their names. In fact, the setting in this particular project was anonymous. They were anonymous peer reviews. And if I wanted to ask the other student to clarify what they meant, I could write a little comment and have a dialogue backwards and forwards. So what we're doing is framing a highly structured also, but highly social review process. Again, remember the newspaper where there's the copy editor, there's the overall editor of the newspaper. Remember the lawyer's office where multiple lawyers and clients and whatever look at the contract. So framing text, the careful business of designing text, always involves these structured social processes. Now I'm the student and I'm now up to the revision phase of my work. I'm up to taking on board all those comments, revising my work, polishing it up. I've got multiple comments from multiple perspectives. Maybe the teacher's done the same thing. Maybe they've written a review. Maybe they've put annotations in there. So I've got all these comments and I'm revising. And after I finished revising, what's possible is to write a self-review, which is my own reflection on the writing process. So here's another student in another Rosa Parks biography, and what the student's doing is reflecting on the way in which the other students' feedback influenced their writing. And finally, their work gets published in a student portfolio. This again, Scholar. This happens to be a real student who's given us permission to use their page, and in the image. And see over here, these are her publications there, and so they get published to a portfolio, and all the other members of the class are able to read that student's work. It goes out to a real audience. It really gets published to the world. Just to summarise now what we've seen going on in those phases. And I'm going to talk about the social and cognitive interactions in writing. I'm going to use the Scholar model because it's visual and because it's concrete and you've just seen an example of it. But in fact, in the writing process, things like this go on all the time. So in Scholar, on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got the writing, and on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got a number of things going on. Okay, so let me talk about that contrast between the left-hand side of the screen and the right-hand side of the screen. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we have my individual writing. That's me, and I'm typing, I'm putting in images, I'm writing, I'm creating a text. And on the right-hand side, I've got social dialogue about the writing. I've got feedback coming in from various perspectives. On the left, I've got a piece of writing which refers to something in the world. It might be a story that I've written, it might be a piece of scientific text, but it's something specific and empirical. It's a piece of expression which refers to something in the world, fictional or factual, whatever it may be. But on the right, I've got kind of generalizing theoretical reflection about the science that I'm doing, the writing that I'm doing. In the rubric, and in the annotations, I'm forced to think reflectively about the nature of the text and the way in which it's expressed. So it's, if you like, a generalized kind of theoretical view of things. On the left, I've got cognition. I'm thinking as I write. I'm thinking deeply, complex thought. But on the right, I'm thinking about the conditions of my thinking, right? Metacognition. I'm thinking about what a rubric specifies, whether it's a rubric about writing or a rubric about the content of writing, for example, the content of science expressed in writing, that's operating metacognitively. On the left, I've got the learning that I'm doing because I'm learning as I write, as I develop my piece of writing. And on the right, I have assessment going on. So assessment and instruction are very closely connected with each other. So what we have in every phase is a kind of a dialectic, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. I write my work, I look at the rubric. I get somebody else's work, I write a review. I get my work back, I read their comments. I revise my work, I write a self-review. So these two sides, the individual, the empirical, cognition, learning on one side, and then the social, the theoretical, the metacognitive, and the world of assessment on the right, they're always going backwards and forwards. It's a complex social process. But getting back to the basic theme with which I started this sequence of videos about writing, it's a highly designed process which is just so different from speaking.